so much for having me, Derek.
I'm so excited. Hey, we're live on the show, so we're gonna start putting this out to the feeds and to the channels. And so I've got a link here that I'm gonna go to the live show for and make sure I put it in there so that people can jump in, and if they want to ask us questions or join in, and have a conversation with us, they can do that.
That'd be
So
great.
give me just a second here. Kaveri, though, while I'm doing this, where are you dialing in from?
I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio, visiting my sister and brother-in-law and nephews who live here. But I am normally based in Lisbon, Portugal.
Hmm. And how is we're gonna dive in and find out why you went to Lisbon, how it's been there while you're there, and all of that. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
give me a second here while I fix this. Okay, so the hard part about this, Kaveri, is as I figure this out. So thank you for
Yeah.
being patient because the
Yeah,
hard part
absolutely.
is just learning how to deal with all my tools here and make it happen. So
Well, I can
comments,
give
okay.
while you do that, I can give like a little background on myself, where I'm
Yeah, give us your background. Tell us
from.
what you're doing, what you're working on. I tried to share with everybody kind of your thing, but yeah, give us a little background. Introduce
Yeah,
yourself.
absolutely. So my professional life is an ESG consultant, specifically focused on writing ESG reports for corporations. But my background is in journalism and international relations. And I grew up originally in North Florida in a small town called St. Augustine, which is a historic town. It's actually the oldest city in the United States. It was a Spanish colony. Um, and I like to think that my eventual move to Europe, which I did, I moved in November 2023. But I lived in Norway before for a couple of years previously. But my most recent move, I feel like, was somewhat inspired by growing up in this like small town that has a very Spanish feel. Still
Mm,
has this very historic old downtown, like the oldest schoolhouse and the oldest restaurant, and all these like
yeah.
oldest places that are and it's beautiful cobblestones and Spanish tiles and stuff. And yeah, I like to think that part of that seeped into me in some way, inspired me to move to Europe eventually. But
How's your Portuguese? Are you picking up the language?
I'm picking it up. I'm picking it up slowly but surely. It's happening. Lisbon's very interesting because it's full of expats. There's a lot of expats and a lot of immigrants there. So there are a lot of English speakers, and which it can be a bit of a crutch when
Yeah.
you're trying to learn a new language. Um, but I am learning. I have this little cafe I go to every morning where I have my coffee. It costs 85 cents for my Americano. And
What?
I know, it's a shock. Very affordable to go every morning and have one or even sometimes two coffees if I'm feeling extravagant.
Yeah.
And everybody that goes there is like, they only take cash. They're all like middle-aged to elderly Portuguese people. And so they don't, nobody really speaks English there. And so that forces me to speak Portuguese and practice. So that's good.
Yeah. I love that. How about if you're joining us live, I'm here with Kaveri Marate. She's joining us from no, what would normally be Lisbon, but right now in Cincinnati, Ohio. But we're talking about her time working and living abroad in Lisbon. And I want to know, I mean, what about lunch? What's the average cost for your lunch? Are you paying 25 bucks for lunch?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I pay
Mm,
probably, lunch is like maybe, you can do it for like $7 or $8.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
reasonable.
Yeah.
That's
Very
good.
reasonable.
All right. Well, what we're going to do, Kaveri, is I want to talk to you about. I mean, we've kind of got this theme. You and I have had conversations, and you're sort of acting on your dreams. I think, in one way, which is really cool. And you've got this curious and creative spirit about you. You and I worked together. We met when we were working at Think Parallax, but I want to explore today just sort of all the different experiences the experiences you've had. Your resume is great. You've had all these different, kind of work experiences, whether it's entrepreneurship or working in agencies or being a consultant or being a writer. So I want to unpack all of that and kind of walk through what you've done, how it's led to where you are today, get some advice for career builders that are out there. And I think talk a little bit about the evolution of sustainability roles, because as you mentioned, you're an ESG and sustainability writer, but I know there's a lot more to it. But yeah, just as you said, though, is that what you're kind of positioning yourself as? As you're putting yourself out there looking for work, are you putting yourself out there as a sustainability writer?
Yes, exactly right. Exactly
How
right.
are how are you seeing the space change? How's sustainability changing out there for you? And are clients out there different than what you were experiencing while you were here stateside?
That's a great question. So I'm still mostly working for American companies.
Okay.
So mainly because they pay better, to be quite
Mm,
to be quite frank. And I already have a pretty well established network.
okay.
Um, I would say the biggest thing that's changing my role in particular is AI and the growth of tools like ChatGPT.
Mm. And meaning it's a lot easier to write things, or that companies are saying, hey, we'll just use AI to write a report, or that others are coming in and taking the roles that you would have had and saying doing it for cheaper, faster, different.
Yeah, a little bit of the first two. So definitely some companies are starting to do kind of a hybrid approach where maybe they have a consultant, but they're
Hmm.
also having the consultant work with their internal team member who's writing the report using an AI tool.
Okay.
Or in my personal work, I am in some cases, unless my contract specifies that I'm not allowed to use AI tools, which some of them do specify.
Mm-hmm.
Some clients do not want to be using AI, and we can get into some of the reasons for that. But I have found it to be a useful tool when I'm writing, mainly in the editing and rewriting process,
Mm-hmm.
when a client might offer some feedback that says, love this sentiment. Can we rephrase? Can we change this word? Can we, phrase this differently? I can then go into ChatGPT or another tool and put the sentence in and say, hey, give me like three options for how you would rephrase this.
Yeah.
And I may not copy paste it directly, but it gives me some inspiration to work from.
So two questions I want to, because you just mentioned it. Why are they not wanting to use I guess one, and then two would be, what are your go-to tools? The Chat GPT, Perplexity. I mean, I'm starting to make my little catalog of all the things I should know about. So if you're willing to share, but
Yeah.
first, why are clients maybe hesitant?
One thing I've seen is there is still some fear uh, of privacy issues.
Mm,
So they don't want a consultant taking, because we're under NDA when we're working with a client
mm-hmm.
because they're sharing a mountain of data and internal information, like
Right.
private information with us.
Okay.
So there is some risk that if you're putting some of that information into a tool, that it's getting absorbed by the tool and entering into the AI database.
Yeah.
So there is like some risk of, some disclosure risk there. That's probably that's probably the main thing. And then I think
Yeah.
the other thing is there are some fears around hallucinations with AI writing or kind of all AI tools.
Explain that. I've heard that
Yeah.
term. I don't know. I wouldn't be able to
Yeah.
explain it myself.
So hallucinations are basically where the AI makes something up,
Ah, okay.
where it's trying to provide service a service to you. It's trying
Yeah.
to answer your question, and maybe it doesn't know the answer, and so it will fabricate something. And so obviously that's a big risk in a publicly printed report that a corporation is saying, we've fact
Yeah.
checked everything
Yeah,
in here.
exactly.
Um, so I think that's probably the other fear is that while these AI I mean, the speed at which they're improving is really terrifyingly fast.
Yeah, remarkable and terrifying, I guess, at the same time, right?
Yeah, it's incredible. But I think, bigger companies, there is a process. They've been doing this for many years. Like, why mess with the process when you have something that works and while these kinks are getting worked out.
So if we can stick on the AI topic, because I'm doing a little education. I'm going through a course, doing as many free courses as I can, trying to understand it and learn it. And I do know, AI works in this way where is you just keep feeding it examples. So you don't tell it what to do. You feed it examples and you start to say, this is a good one. This is a bad one. This is a good one. This is a bad one. At what point do you think there's enough learning in there, or if any, I wonder if anybody's working on it, where they've the catalog now specifically looking at ESG reports can kind of do can pump out something that's like, oh, that's pretty good at a first
Pretty good.
take, and I can work with this.
Yeah.
Are we close to that? Are you hearing anything about that, or are we still ways off, you think?
I'm not sure. I'll be
Yeah.
honest. This past year, which I'm sure we'll get to, I've been taking a sabbatical, so I've only done one client project this past season.
Okay.
So I'm a little out of the loop when it comes to ESG reporting and the use of AI
Okay.
specifically.
We'll have to report
Um,
back. We'll have to check back in with you then after more
yeah,
clients.
absolutely. Check back in like a year, and I think I'll have better intel for you on that. But
Who knows what things are going to look like in a year, right?
yeah,
That's wild.
I know.
Kaveri, tell me then, you mentioned sabbatical, but what are you working on right now that's got you excited? And you tell us a little bit about what you were doing before the move out to Lisbon.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now like I said, I'm taking a sabbatical from doing ESG reporting. I did do one client project, but I'm working on a novel. As I'm a writer, so I've been, a writer since I started writing on my high school newspaper when I was 16. So like more than 20 years now. Shocking.
So this
Um,
has this been a novel 20 years in the making?
Maybe I think a novel has been
Okay.
kind of bubbling inside me for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And the one I'm writing right now is I'll I don't know that it'll ever actually get published. But you kind of have to write your first one in order to write the one that does get published. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I guess I'm somebody who's kind of in me. I'm like dream, right? Someday I want to write a book. It won't be a novel, but it'll be a book, maybe
Yeah.
something. But are you telling me then that I have to write the whole thing first, scrap it, and then write another one? Is that typically how it goes with writers?
Maybe not scrap it, but I
Okay.
think it depends on a number of factors. But I've been watching Masterclass.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm a
Masterclass,
subscriber.
it's so incredible. I mean, I really recommend it to everybody because
How are they making money?
I have
That's what I
no
want to
idea.
know.
I have
Right?
no idea. I mean,
Or
it's
how much are they paying the instructors
yeah,
are they paying Martha Stewart, and how much do you pay her to like do a masterclass?
right. I mean, it must be thousands of dollars.
At
And I mean, I
least.
paid $100 for like a full year subscription.
Yeah, it doesn't make
So
sense, but
I know and so I recommend it to everybody because like you're saying, it's like a phenomenal resource and
mm-hmm.
so affordable. And so they have like maybe 17 or 18 different courses by different writers, famous writers.
Okay.
And so I'm just learning a huge amount from those masterclass courses. And something that a lot of these, really well-known writers like Dan Brown, Margaret Atwood, Amy Tan, a lot of what they say is that their first book didn't not only did it not get published, but they're glad that it didn't get published,
Mm.
which is so interesting.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is, the our focus here is kind of talking on careers and what you've done, and I think that is sort of the theme no matter what you do. Right? I think no matter what you're trying to do, like you just have to start putting out work. You have to write your first sustainability report. You look back like, oh, I can't believe I did that, or I wouldn't
Yeah.
have done it that way. But it doesn't matter, right? Even if you're starting a band, you've got to start putting out music, and you're going to listen back and just go, but it's really important to do, right? And
Yeah.
so this novel that you're working on right now, when will this draft, do you think? How far along are you?
I'm about halfway done.
Okay.
Yeah, through my writing the first draft. So I'm like about 20,000 words.
20,000
And
words equates to about how many pages?
good question. So I'm actually handwriting. So I don't know
Like
in
that? Like this?
like this with
Jeez.
paper and a pen. I know. So I'm writing about 400 words a page.
Okay.
And I think I've written about 50 pages.
And what's the genre?
It's a historical fiction.
Mm.
Yeah.
Anything else you can tell us about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the
Tell us.
thing that I found, this year sabbatical was really like, and partly, honestly, it was driven by AI, because I felt like ESG reports are going to become more and more automated
Mm-hmm.
because number one, there are so many of them for AIs to learn from. There are thousands of them online for free.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they are. relatively from a tonal, like the tone of each of these are pretty standardized. They're very like general corporate tone. So there's not a ton of style to them.
Right? Yeah.
Um, and they are like in terms of the topics that are included, they're generally pretty formulaic.
Mm.
So I think they're honestly a really good place for to be automated. It's a kind of
Yeah.
an ideal place if I were to, you know, talk people out of hiring me for a job.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's ripe for AIs, the overtaking of the AIs
Yeah,
of the robots.
yeah, exactly. And so
Hmm.
kind of my thinking was from a long-term planning perspective, if this is, maybe I have another 5-ish years of ESG report writing in front of me
Hmm.
that I can make money doing.
Yeah.
But like,
If
what's
that.
next?
Yeah.
How
What's
am I
next?
going to reinvent myself? And so
Uh-huh.
this
Mm.
year off was sort of an opportunity to invest in whatever my future career path will be.
That's a big step, though, taking a sabbatical and moving to another country. I guess so. That I mean, you just kind of walked us through with sort of the catalyst, but was that enough to kind of say, "I'm packing it up, I'm going"? Was there something, some other event, or was it had this always kind of been brewing? I guess what got you to say, "I did it. I bought the ticket. I'm in. I'm out. Shutting everything down."
Yeah,
It's a big move. How long had you been thinking about it?
it's a big move. I've been thinking about probably 10 years.
There
Honestly,
we
a
go.
really
There we
long
go.
time. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
I lived in Norway. I studied abroad in Italy when I was an undergrad
Okay. And where'd you do your undergrad at?
at NYU,
Yeah. Okay.
and
And
I
then you
studied
also
in
went. Then
Florence.
you did graduate work at Georgetown, right?
That's right.
Okay.
And so
So
then
you.
during my grad school, I did my summer in between years. I did in Paris, interning at UNESCO.
Wow. And I'm sorry, but where did you study abroad at undergrad? You said.
At NYU had its own campus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was in Florence,
Okay.
Italy.
Yeah. So Florence. Okay.
Yeah. So I had this, and then after graduating from my master's, I got a job in Oslo, Norway, and I moved
Wow.
there for like a little under 2 years.
Okay. So you're an experienced world traveler.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
Europe. I had gotten a lot of exposure to different parts of Europe and
Hmm.
European lifestyle, and it felt much more aligned with my personal lifestyle preferences, my values, and so I've just been, I'd moved to a number of different US cities. I lived in New York, I lived in DC, I grew up in Florida. During COVID, I lived here in Cincinnati with my sister for a few months,
Hmm.
and then I moved to Miami. And I just never quite found the right fit, it felt like,
Hmm. Did you ever try
in
the
an
West Coast?
American city. No, I never lived in the West Coast.
All
That
right.
was actually, I was applying for, during COVID, I was applying for jobs in the US and in Europe. Those were kind of
Okay.
my, sorry, in California and in Europe.
Kaveri, for our younger career builders, career navigators, how important was study abroad for you and kind of making those leaps and doing those internships abroad? I mean, obviously it's informed who you are today, but
Yeah.
would you advise others to take that leap?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so valuable to have that international experience, partly because it takes you out of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you really understand what you're capable of when you are outside of your comfort zone or when you're on the edge of your comfort zone.
Yeah. So, all of that to say, so you're on this sabbatical, and how long were you? How long was the sabbatical supposed to be? How long were you giving yourself, and how long do you think it'll end up being?
That's a good question. I gave myself a year. I
Okay.
started in September of last year, and um my goal is to keep it at right at a year. I might
Okay.
start. I'm getting like a little antsy, so I might start putting feelers out for projects a little earlier than I was anticipating, maybe like
Mm,
beginning of the summer. I was
yeah.
planning on starting back end of the summer, but yeah.
And so, does that mean right now, basically, you're a full-time writer? So every day you get your 85-cent coffee, and
Yeah.
and you've got your notebook, and
hmm
you're writing.
Yeah. And I have a
What a great
co-working
experience,
space
though.
that I go to,
Okay.
and that helps give me some structure.
So if I want to look back, Kaveri, because we talked a little bit about your, your degrees, where you went to school, traveling abroad, but I guess looking back at, I'm really fascinated by just looking at you today and then realizing that there's this whole sea of choices and decisions that were made behind that as you built your career. Were you intentional, do you think, in sort of building this career that you've built? All those different, the different experiences you've had, the different places you've worked, you've built a really good, strong resume. Walk me through if you can. Going into school, did you know what you wanted to do? Has it all worked out kind of according to plan, or was it just sort of coincidence maybe, and one thing led to another?
Very much the latter, coincidence and one thing led to another. I think going in, and there have been several times in my life where I was like, I had a very clear objective, a very clear vision of what I was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And as it does, life got in the way and
Mm-hmm.
things changed unexpectedly. And so the first time that happened was during undergrad or right after undergrad. So I worked on my high school newspaper. I worked in my local paper in St. Augustine when I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And my intention was to go to NYU and become a journalist and work for a newspaper and be a print journalist. And during right after I graduated in 2007, and then the market crashed in
Mm-hmm.
2008.
Yeah.
And so I had been working at a community paper in Washington, in New York City, in the West Village. I was like editing their community paper,
Okay. Were you dreaming
and
of like New York Times or something?
yeah, exactly, like
Yeah.
New York Times, Wall Street Journal, something that
Yep.
level.
Okay.
And yeah, and when the market crashed, basically tons of journalists got laid off, and any roles that would have been available to basically a young journalist starting out became much harder to get because now you had more seasoned professionals out on the market who are freelancing and looking for work. So
Right.
the competition changed dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay, I need to come up with a different strategy because I don't know that this is going to work for me unless maybe I move to some random city in the US and find a job at some
Mm-hmm.
small paper.
Yeah. So it's time to pivot.
It's time to pivot. So that
Yeah.
could have been a pivot that I pursued. I ended
Mm-hmm.
up deciding to go to grad school.
Okay.
And I had always been interested in global issues. I'm Indian American. As a kid, we grew up going and spending summers in India. And I'd done that semester abroad in Italy. And so I had a real kind of thirst and interest in what was going on in the world beyond the US. And so
Mm-hmm.
I decided to study international relations.
Yeah, and it's Master of Science in Foreign Service and International Relations and Security.
Hmm.
So this was kind of like, hey, you might be headed in a new direction.
Yeah, exactly. And so when I was going into grad school, my intention was to go into the foreign service and become a diplomat.
Mm,
And a lot of my classmates did end up doing that and are in the US foreign service or international foreign services for other countries.
wow.
But I did an internship when I was in grad school for the US Department of Commerce.
Okay.
And I was working in their Office of Energy and Environmental Industries because I had this interest in environmental issues
Mm-hmm.
at that time. And I was like, let me try out this internship. I'll get a taste of the government, I'll get a taste of environmental stuff. And I loved the environmental piece. I hated the government piece. It was like
Be-
not for me.
just because of the layers, it moves too slow, too much bureaucracy, too much red tape, kind of thing, or
Exactly. Just like
yeah.
and so much politics,
Mm-hmm.
there's so it's really, I mean, it's like Veep, there's they're
Which
like
is hilarious, by the way. Plug for Veep if
yeah,
you haven't watched it, and it's uncanny as well. It's like, wait, what? When did they film this?
I know, right? Like so prescient.
Yeah.
Um yeah, and it was like, I mean, it just made me crazy with
Mm,
bureaucracy and red tape. Like kudos, and I mean, I really feel for, not to get too political right now, but I really feel for the people who have been laid off
yeah.
from those jobs because they're not easy. They take a tremendous amount of patience, which
And
I
it's
do
a
not have.
yeah, patience and like you said, I mean, it is a skill set. It's like being an athlete of sort. Like you have to be
Yeah.
trained in the art of working in government, being a bureaucrat, working in politics, like that's a whole thing. And so
It's
you
like a
were not,
marathon.
yeah,
Yeah.
you weren't up for it.
No, I'm like, I need immediate results. I need tangible impact. That's much more my style. So
Yeah.
it was a good learning that I was like, I don't think this will be a good fit for me. And so then, yeah, and then I ended up going into the private sector and consulting,
Okay. And is that so?
sustainability consulting.
So you started sustainability consulting,
Mhm.
but you also, I know you've had an entrepreneurial, bit as well with your textiles startup.
Mhm.
When did that come in? When did you get that sort of itch to do something entrepreneurial?
Mm. Yeah, so I think in my consulting role when I was at
Hmm.
Zenteo, that was my job in Norway.
Okay.
We were doing work with a lot of big corporations, and the projects were really interesting. And it was really interesting to work at a high level and really be shaping projects that companies with a large potential impact could be implementing.
Hmm.
It felt really like working with a big company that's a multinational that touches customers all around the world, that has, big operations, making changes on that level has a real impact. And that was sort of what inspired me initially. But I found that sometimes the work itself, my role, didn't always feel so tangible. And
Mm,
so doing my startup, I moved back to the US in 2016.
okay.
And so that's when I started working on my startup idea. Because I wanted to do something that felt a little bit more impactful from, like I wanted to be able to, say like my impact, my actions led to this outcome.
And was it more fulfilling then? I mean, actually going through it then, did it meet that expectation? Did it kind of fulfill those hopes? And are you still working on that project or how'd that go?
Yes and no. Yes and
Mm,
no. I think so my the what the project was a clothing recycling service.
mm-hmm,
I started doing all this research to figure out what did I want to do. I knew I wanted to do something in the sustainability space. And initially I thought about doing upcycled dresses out of old saris because thinking about my grandmother and my mom have all these old saris
mm-hmm.
that they don't wear anymore.
And they're
They're these
beautiful.
they're beautiful, beautiful
Yeah.
fabric, beautiful material, beautiful design. And I was like, what if I turn them into Western style dresses? That was like kind of the original idea that I had. And then as
Mm-hmm.
I started researching the clothing industry, which
Yeah.
I'm sure
Yeah.
you know the stats very well
Yeah.
also. I was
You were
I
shocked.
I was shocked. I was just
Yeah.
shocked by the amount of textile waste.
Yeah.
And I realized like even if I am making new clothing out of old materials or
Mm-hmm.
upcycled materials, if they're still going to end up in the trash, I'm not really making a big impact. I'm still just like selling more stuff to people that they don't need,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah, then you find yourself kind of stirring up demand, because you've got to sell the things that you made, and if you
Yeah.
have a business, it has to be profitable, which means you have to sell your goods, and all of a sudden you're like, please buy my things, and here's why you should,
Yeah.
right?
And then you're like marketing and it's a whole you yeah, you kind of become part of the
Yeah, and you're like,
problem you
and then
were
you're like,
trying
wait,
to
what
solve.
happened? This was not the goal. This was
Yeah.
not my plan.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh.
Exactly.
Mm.
And
So were
so
you
then
focused on kind of the science side of like, hey, getting into chemical or physical recycling of garments and
yeah,
textiles?
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the gap in the market that I had identified was from the consumer to the actual recycler. And what I
Mm-hmm.
found was that a lot of people, I was living in Washington D.C. at the time. A lot of people don't have a car, and so it wasn't necessarily easy for them to drop their clothes off. Like if they were getting rid of old clothes, it wasn't really easy for them to get it to a Goodwill or a Salvation Army or another donation point.
Right.
And I was doing like customer discovery, and I even talked to some people who were like, oh, yeah, I've had this bag of clothes in my trunk for 3 months, and I keep meaning to go drive over to the Goodwill, and I keep forgetting to do it.
Yeah.
So I created a pickup service. So
Okay.
basically, customers could go on my website, book a pickup, and then I would go to their house, pick up their bags, and sort through, and then either resell the higher quality garments or donate or recycle the unwanted
Mm.
stuff or the lower value.
What'd you learn from that experience?
Oh my God, so much.
I know.
So much.
Top three learnings, top three
Yeah, okay.
takeaways.
All right, this is great. I think probably the biggest learning was your business model has to work. Your
Mm,
business model has to be profitable
yeah,
because even if you're doing a social enterprise, we still live in a capitalist society.
yeah.
Our economy is capitalistic. You need to make more profit than the cost of doing service.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I was not able to make the math work. The labor associated with sorting was astronomical.
Yeah, I've done that a little bit. One of the companies I worked for, we would do like a jeans drive, right? And because the goal is, you'd get them, you'd get this massive bulk. You're like, yay, that's great. We had all this participation, and now you've got your warehouse full of all these
Yeah.
jeans that you have to sort through and decide which are going to homeless shelters, which are good enough to be donated, and it's like, and it's a dirty job. I mean,
It's a dirty
because
job.
you don't know what you're getting,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah. And I had this sort of like series of things happen towards the end before I decided to shut my startup down. And one of them was receiving a gun, a loaded
In
handgun in one
in
of
the
my pickup
products.
bags.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
So that was,
I never had the pleasure of finding that, but yeah, because it's just people are just saying here thanks, and they're not they getting everybody
people would like leave
involved.
stuff on their porch. They'd be like, okay,
Yeah,
opening the pickup, we're gonna leave the bags on the porch, and I would just go and grab the bags from the porch. And
and so the loaded gun was that sort of the final straw. We're like, that's that.
yeah,
I'm out. I'm out.
I like threw my back out from lifting all these heavy bags. I had to go get like
Did you have a team? Like,
shoulder.
did you have help? Were there did you have a little team, or were you really kind of doing this as a solopreneur project and trying to prove concept and build it?
Yeah, it was mainly solopreneur. I did have a couple of interns that I
Mm-hmm.
hired who were
Mm-hmm.
helping me sort through clothing, but it was, yeah, pretty much a one man
So lessons
operation.
learned. Make sure it's a scalable model
Yeah.
that is profitable.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah, and then also impact. If you're doing a social enterprise, what I saw was that the people who are throwing clothes away
Hmm.
were not my were not my target market. Like my target market were people who cared already. Like they were unlikely to put their clothing in the trash. Like that was going to be their last resort.
Hmm. Yeah.
The place, it's mainly people from lower income communities, from lower income housing, who don't have the means to get to drop off their stuff.
Right.
Don't have access, can't afford to book a pickup, you know, for me to come and get their stuff, and just have other more pressing issues at
Right.
hand.
Yeah. Huh.
So I wasn't quite able to figure out how to target those people who were really the perpetrators of
Yeah.
child waste.
It's
And
tough, but
then
I'm. Go ahead. Yeah. Keep going.
yeah, and then the last piece was just around recycling, was that the more I
Mm.
looked into it, and I think that this hasn't really changed that much since I ran my startup, which was almost 10 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, there just aren't good options for actual textile recycling,
Yeah, and
fiber
there,
recycling.
that's exactly it. And I still think it hasn't changed. I mean, it's still sort of this pipe dream. It's sort of the holy grail, if you will. It's
Yeah,
idea of like, oh, you collect it all and you put it into a machine and it separates out all the polymers and fibers and then you use it again. It's like that's what we hope, but it's so complicated and there's so much that goes into it. And just even identifying what's in the garment you're putting in there, like, well, what is it made of? The tags are gone. Like, is it
yeah,
really viscose or is it polyester or is it
yeah.
wait, it's really tough. So it's a
Right, and they're
big
all blended materials and
almost everything we wear now is blended with everything, and the hardest fibers to recycle, like elastane, and the spandex in there, those it's very tough. It's
yeah,
gooey and it's messy, and so we're all just waiting for that to happen. So you
yeah,
were ahead of your time,
yeah,
but it was I'm sure, a good experience. But then you went on to work at the World Bank, to work for the World Bank, Qantas, Think Parallax, the Global Innovation Forum, all of these things. I guess walk me through which of those, I guess, kind of boil up to the top in terms of lessons learned. If you kind of had to look back, which of those, how has all of that work informed who you are today, how you work today, and what
Yeah.
you're setting out to do next?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say there's like a few key learnings, and one one that maybe is not as obvious and maybe is not one that you'll always hear about is really going to work somewhere that is a, is fun. You know, where the vibe is good.
Mm,
Because you have to be there every day, whether you're in person or you're virtual. You're spending, in most cases, 8 hours of your day with these people. You need to like them and you need to feel respected at your job. And
mm.
if you're in a toxic workplace, that is going to spill over into all other parts of your life.
Yeah, you end up taking it home with you, right? You bring that toxicity home, and it just festers, and
Yeah,
that is no good.
it's
So
not
find
good.
find a place that you love, that you where you like the people, you appreciate the people, where you're being respected. I want to pause there for a second because we have a comment from William Leach over here, which going back to the topic we were just on, love of textiles. He's asking, do you get to work with companies involved in textiles today as well with Think Parallax when we were there? And I guess the short answer was we worked with companies doing their sustainability reports, but nothing in terms of necessarily dealing with any initiatives when it came to um, recycling or
Mm.
innovations in materials. Is that the same? Would you agree?
So I did work for one client that did that handled waste,
Mm,
and they were actually doing some textile recycling, and so that was
really?
pretty interesting. Yeah, they had an initiative going on where, and they're a massive company. They have a lot of logistics
Hmm.
and what's the word, infrastructure, I guess,
Yeah.
for doing pickups. And so they had, it was interesting to see that from, many years later after I had done my project where the infrastructure was such a big challenge of having the vehicles to go pick up the material, having the manpower to go through it, and then having the end market or, the recycling capacity. And this company happened to have all of those pieces and we're starting to tinker with textile recycling.
Kaveri, all you had to do was stick with it for 20 years. That's all you had to do is keep, yeah, loading bags in your car, sorting through them. I mean, you would have been there. William also asked about Blue Sign, and that's something as well. Blue Sign is a clean, hazardous chemicals initiative that was developed that came out of the apparel industry, which is helping to make clean green chemistry, kind of put forth a positive list. A lot of times in apparel and textile, we'll say, don't use these things.
Right.
Blue Sign is like, well, here's a whole batch of things you can and should use. Because in
Mhm.
recycling at the end too, that's another issue. Like what are we pulling out of those clothing
Yeah.
items? What chemicals are in there, and are they hazardous? And are we
Yeah.
just now recycling, more substances of concern? It's like it's complicated. So William, yes,
It's
Blue Sign is
complicated.
awesome. If you've got a friend that just started working there, that's
I didn't know
great.
about Blue Sign actually. That's interesting. I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah, they're one of the leaders in that space, so definitely a good solution for companies to nominate specific safe, clean chemicals. Kaveri, back to kind of the takeaways from all of those things, though,
Yeah.
the respect, finding good people to work with.
Mhm.
What else has kind of risen to the top here for people?
Mm. Yeah, I think coming back to the point you made earlier about, or the question you were asking earlier about, was it serendipitous or was it more calculated,
Mm-hmm.
my career path? And I would say some of the examples you gave, like Global Innovation Forum, World Bank, a lot of them a bit, were a bit kind of random in a way. Random in the sense that they came to me randomly. GIF was one of my former clients, had a friend who was running the Global Innovation Forum. She knew I was looking for a job when I moved to DC, introduced us. And then the World Bank, I actually had approached my now former boss from the World Bank. I had approached her colleague at the IFC, which is the World Bank's partner institution, the International Finance Corporation.
Mm-hmm.
I had approached somebody there, they're a sustainability person,
Mm-hmm.
about setting up textile recycling in their
Ah,
facilities when I
okay.
was still working on textiles.
Yep.
And she was like, "Hey, are you are you doing this full time? Do you want like a little contract work on the side? And I was like, sure. I'm like
Mm-hmm.
not making any money doing this
Right,
business.
right. Plus, I need to pay my
And
medical bills for my back and
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like potential gunshot wounds. And I'm like,
yes.
and so, so she introduced me to my boss, Monica Kumar, at the World Bank, who was hired, and it was just serendipity that she had just had a team member leave for another team, and she had an opening, and she was like looking for somebody at that moment, and so it just happened to work out perfectly.
Yeah, and I think so. I think you're illustrating just sort of, I think, the importance of connecting with people,
Yeah.
networking. I also think, though, so this is kind of a two-part question. If you look at your resume, how do you feel about it when you look at your LinkedIn, profile and bio?
Mm.
What comes to mind for you? And then, because I think I've got something I want to I'll stop there. How do you feel when you look at your
Yeah.
resume at this point?
Yeah, I when I look back from the point I'm at now, I feel really fortunate
Mm-hmm.
because I've been able to create a lifestyle for myself and a work as a component of that works so well for me. And I've really my focus has very much been making work a part of my life and not making my life a part of my work, if that
Mm.
makes sense, or
Yeah.
making yeah, like finding a work life balance in which work fit into my lifestyle and not making my lifestyle fit around my job.
Yeah.
And that was really important to me. And through the different steps I've taken, have been able to get to the point now where as a freelancer, I make my own hours more or less. I take the projects that I want to take. I don't go back to clients who I don't have a good working relationship with. I'm able to pick and choose and I'm able to support my lifestyle really comfortably without sacrificing my values, if that makes sense.
100% it does, but I also guess I guess in one sense hearing you say that, I mean, in one way that's a privilege,
Yeah.
but it's also a privilege that you created,
Mm.
and you said it was serendipitous that you met the person who then got you this, and it was serendipitous that they were like, "Oh, your startup informed that." So I'm thinking that it really isn't serendipitous in one way because like you put all that in place, like you built that, and
Mm.
kind of I guess if you had to unwind it,
Yeah.
what was the thing? Was it because of this of going to school and getting a degree, or was it because of your initiative and your character? Let's try to wrap it up and give some advice to people of
Mm.
like, if you look back learning from what you've done and having this be able to afford this privilege that you have to work the way you want,
Yeah.
what do you attribute it all to?
Yeah. That's a great question. I would say the biggest underlying factor has really been aligning my choices with my values.
Hmm.
And so what I mean by that is that number one, understanding what are your values? Like really understanding for yourself, not just saying like my parents, my society, my community handed me these values and these are the values that I'm living by. But
Mm-hmm.
really stopping and questioning for yourself, like what's important to me? How do I want to live my life?
Yeah.
What makes me what will make me proud of myself? And what will make me not ashamed of myself? Let's say that also, what are your
Yeah.
actual values? And
I,
then
can I stop you and
matching,
ask you at
yeah.
what point did you do that for yourself and
Mhm.
kind of take that inventory?
Yeah, honestly, it took me a long time. I think I was through my 20s and even probably like my early 30s, I
Okay.
was still very much trying to be like a good Indian girl,
Mm.
and
Mm-hmm.
do what my family wanted me to trying to walk the line of like, how can I still do what I want to do and what makes me feel fulfilled, but
Mm-hmm.
also make my family happy?
Yeah, yeah.
And I was very much torn in two because they weren't happy and I wasn't happy when I was
So
doing
nothing's
it.
working.
So nothing's working. So it was really kind of in that like mid 30s. COVID was a great time to like reflect and reset my value, like kind of reflect on what I was doing and figure out what my path forward was.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think that was really when I started to throw away some of the things that were not working for me.
Yeah. Huh. Anything else that you can think of that so aligning your values
Yeah, and really
how
like living in accordance with your values.
mm,
Even when it's not easy. I think it can be easy. It's like, you have the preacher who is like, an alcoholic on the on the side.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
actually living your values. Like if you are I'm trying to think of a good example. Like sometimes my family was just like, why don't you make more money?
Mm,
Or why don't you drive a nicer car? Or why don't you live in a bigger house? And I was like, but those things aren't important to me,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know? So I could have gone and chased those things and, lived that lifestyle, but I wouldn't be doing it for myself. I would be doing it for someone else's approval. And so I think when I started saying, well, I live very comfortably within my means. I don't need a bigger car. I don't need I love taking public transit. I love riding my bike. Those things make me happy. So that aligns well with my values of sustainability and living a smaller, more reasonable lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah, so
You know?
you took control of the narrative.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting down to our last few minutes here, Kaveri. I want to let you get back to things, and we'll wrap it up here. But is there anything, I guess, that we missed out that you want to plug? We've got a book that we need to look out for. You're doing your writing. You're on your sabbatical. You're out in Lisbon. You've positioned yourself in a great place to be able to do things the way you want to do. It seems like you did everything right on your resume, and it seems like you got to a good person, place where you made some good personal choices, and you're like, hey, you're living on your terms. Got any last advice for career builders and navigators out there for you from you?
Yeah, I would say even though it looks good, but there were a
Hmm.
lot of twists and turns there. There were a lot of times where I was like not sure I had made the right choice. There were moments where I was unemployed and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do next, where I'm going to find my next job.
Uncertainty was there.
Uncertainty was there, and
Hmm.
I think the thing that I always tried to do was follow my curiosity. Follow the stuff that sparked joy for me.
Mm.
And that has even going into uncertain moments and navigating uncertain moments, that has always been the thing that allowed me to step forward and step upwards is pursuing the things that, you know, kept me hooked, basically.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like just being honest with yourself, going forward, always moving forward. Kaveri, thank you so much. Thanks for taking time with us today. Have fun visiting family. Safe travels getting back to Lisbon. And I want to touch in. I want to touch in again to see how AI is informing and
Absolutely.
changing your workspace
Yeah.
and how if at all it informs your novel. But best of luck on it all. And thanks for sharing some advice with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Derek. This is super fun, and yeah, absolutely. Keep in touch, and I'd love to circle back in a year, a few months, and let you know how things are going.
If not sooner. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll do it. All right, Kaveri. Hang tight real quick while I close this up. And for everybody else, thanks for joining us. Appreciate you being here. And we'll catch you next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, so hang tight real quick if you can, just so I can upload the file here to make sure we captured all. So that way I've got the assets. Yours is